Okay, so we are reading from 5.22. Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkayona evate adyantavanta kaunteya nateshu ramate buddha. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. Purport. Material sense pleasures are due to contact of the material senses, which are all temporary because the body itself is temporary. A liberated soul is not interested in anything which is temporary. Knowing well the joys of transcendental pleasures, how can a liberated soul agree to enjoy false pleasure? Okay, so yesterday actually I was discussing this in the Bhagavatam class. Um, so happiness, um, there's happiness in the mode of goodness, happiness in the mode of passion, happiness in the mode of ignorance, and happiness in the mode of happiness that is in transcendence. Happiness in transcendence is in Krishna because he's Satchidananda. So when we engage in devotional service, we experience that happiness. So what we experience in devotional service as happiness does not belong to this material world. And happiness that belongs to this material world can be in sattva, rajas, and tamo. But the sattva guna, happiness in sattva guna is, as we know, sattva guna is generally more conducive for spiritual life. So happiness in sattva guna is also conducive, unlike happiness in rajoguna and tamo guna. So here, Prabhupada is saying a liberated soul. One is he is not interested in anything temporary because he's liberated. He doesn't associate himself with this material world. Now, if a liberated soul has experienced transcendental pleasure, then how can he come down to enjoying any lower class pleasure that belongs to the material world? So that is why here the verse is saying intelligent person means intelligent means here who understands who he is, what is the goal of life, etc., etc. He does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to the contact with material senses. So material senses are a source of misery. Because we engage in trying to make the senses happy by either vikarma or karma. Karma is approved, acceptable activities as per Vedas. Vikarma is not acceptable. So when we engage in vikarma, results in suffering in the next life. Now, even karma is suffering because one has to come back to this material world. So an intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery at all in trying to engage with material senses, because either way it is suffering, because one has to come back to this material world, which is anyway temporary. This whole body is temporary, and so on and so forth. So Ramante Yogino Anante Satyanande Chidatmani Iti Rama Padainasu Param Brahma Bidiyate. The mystic derives unlimited transcendental pleasures from absolute truth. And therefore the supreme absolute truth is also known as Rama. Rama means pleasure. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said, Nayam deho deha bhajam loke kashtan kaman arhate vidbujam ye tapo divyam putrakhayena sattvam shuddhyetyasmad brahma sokyam pamantam. My dear sons, this is Rishabdev. My dear sons, there is no reason to labor very hard for sense pleasure while in this human form of life. Such pleasures are available to the stool eaters, hogs. Rather, you should undergo penances in this life by which your existence will be purified, and as a result, you'll be able to enjoy unlimited transcendental bliss. So the whole focus is to try and experience transcendental bliss. Of course, I mean, we at a higher level, we don't try to experience anything. We just want pleasure of Krishna. And when Krishna is pleased, automatically we enjoy, we experience an happiness because we are part and parcel of Krishna. And we are in unison, like, we are dovetailed with Krishna. We are connected to Krishna. Those who are true yogis or learned transcendentalists are not attracted by sense pleasures, which are cause of continuous material existence. The more one is addicted to material pleasures, the more he is entrapped by material miseries. Because when we are addicted to material pleasures, we end up committing things which are painful, which are wrong, and that results in material miseries. So the whole thing is that we should not try to engage in sense gratification, because that is the source of misery. We engage so much, we are concerned so much about this body, which is the source of misery. It is irrational. So Bhagavatam actually says irrational attachment to dead matter. The body is dead. It's only functioning, moving, etc. because of the soul. But not looking at the soul, we just simply attach to the body, which is literally dead. The intelligent person does not take part in this. He doesn't engage in sense gratification because he knows that such pleasures also are temporary, because body is temporary. So what is the point in going behind this? So this is important. But after we come to Krishna consciousness also, we somehow seem to be thinking that there is some happiness in this material world, which is very sad. As in, if you've read Srila Prabhupada's books, if you have really been introspective, it's very easy to understand that this whole material world is just simply miserable. There's nothing here really worth living. The only reason is Krishna. Because everything is coming from Krishna, it also looks, and it looks substantial, right? It looks like there's something worthwhile here, but really there isn't anything. So we should not delight in them. We should not try to find happiness with things in this material world. So, and here Rishabdev so nicely is saying that, sense pleasure, it's available even to the hogs. Every jiva is happy in whatever body it has got. So rather you should undergo penances, tapascharya. So that is what we are trying to do, getting up early in the morning, chanting Hare Krishna, not eating non-prasadam, etc., etc. Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. Unless anybody has any questions. 5.23. Shaknoti haiva yassodam praksharira vimokshanat kama krododbhavam vegam sayuktasya sukhinaraha. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of material senses and check the force of desire and anger, kama krodha is well situated and happy in this world. So this kama krodha have to be given up. Only for this kama and krodha should be directed only towards the Lord, as in relationship with the Lord. It should not be used on the material platform. So vegas, so urges, but nectar of instruction, say vacho vegam, manasakrodha vegam, jibha vegam, udarapasta vegam. So we discussed this before we started Bhagavad Gita. So all these urges one has to tolerate. Tolerate means, yeah, it will come, but don't give too much value to it. Just ignore it. Don't act on it, etc., etc. And also we should check the force of desire and anger. Such a person is well situated and is happy. He can be happy in this world. Bhagavatam says that one who is not trying to become happy will be happy, but as soon as he tries to become happy, his distress starts. One becomes happy in this world if he is not trying to become happy. If he tries to become happy, his distress starts. Hmm. So we should not be running behind any kind of happiness, trying to do this, trying to do that, etc. We should just tolerate all these urges which are vague as nonsense, which just pull us down. And we check these forces of desire and anger also. If we can do this, then we'll be happy. Automatically, we'll experience happiness. If one wants to make steady progress in the path of self-realization, he must try to control the forces of the material senses. These forces are talk, anger, mind, stomach, genitals, and tongue. These are those 6 papers. One who is able to control the forces of all these different senses and the mind is called a Goswami or a Swami. Such Goswamis live strictly controlled lives and forego altogether the forces of senses. Material desires, when unsatiated, generate anger, and thus the mind, eyes, and chest become agitated. Therefore, one must practice to control them before one gives up this material body. So we should understand actually yoga means Indriya Samyama, right? So if we are doing Bhakti Yoga, it doesn't mean that we don't have to control our senses. It just is not, we are not using any mechanical way to control senses like in Ashtanga Yoga. But by engaging our senses in the service of the Lord, we are actually controlling the senses. But without, it doesn't look like it's controlled. So one who is 24 hours engaged in the service of the Lord, his senses are automatically controlled. But for those who are not engaged 24 hours, the senses automatically get engaged in non-Krishna conscious activities, which is where the danger is. So that is why there are do's and don'ts. One is we do bhakti, activities of bhakti. The other is don'ts. We protect ourselves, prevent the senses from doing things that it should not engage in. So do's and don'ts have to be followed. For regulative principles at the beginning, so that has to be followed, and then other injunctions as given in Shastra. No eating, non-prasadam, no mundane entertainment, etc., etc. So all those will help us to actually control. See, the more we indulge our senses in various of these material activities, the more it will be go out of control. Very simple formula. Even without engaging them in this actively in the senses, because of our past vasanas, etc., some nonsense thoughts come up suddenly in our mind, and we have some strange, we behave in strange ways sometimes. But if one engages them actively, then there is no question of bringing them under control. One who can do this is understood to be self-realized, which is controlling, and is thus happy in the state of self-realization. It is a duty of transcendentalists to try strenuously to control desire and anger. See, Prabhupada is using the word strenuously. So those who are struggling with kama krodha have to strenuously try. We fail, but we try. We keep trying continuously. And finally, eventually, we will succeed if you are sincere. So this is very important. We can't just ignore this and say, okay, I'm feeling angry, but it's okay. It said that, just by doing bhakti, everything will be okay. So I will just do bhakti. So both have to be done. You have to engage in sadhana bhakti. At the same time, we should try to impose some kind of control. Otherwise, the mind will go crazy and just so put some rules and stick to those rules. That is what will somewhat discipline the mind. That is why Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that you should beat the mind with chappal and broomstick and all that, because it's just mind is our biggest problem. And this desire and anger, it is all because of attachment. Attachment to this material world, attachment to material things, desire to own them, desire to enjoy them. And when we don't get what we want, we become angry. These things are very important. So one has to tolerate and check the force of desire and anger. Questions? Okay. 5.24. Yontas sukontaramus tathantarjyotirevaya sayogi brahma nirvanam brahmabhutodhigacchati. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme and ultimately he attains the Supreme. So this is, of course, I mean, yogi in the real sense, because he is inward, he is looking at Paramatma in his heart. So his happiness is within. For devotees also, happiness is within in the sense that it's not material. The spiritual happiness found by engaging ourselves in Krishna consciousness. So this applies to us also. Happiness is not on material, based on material things. Uh, when we are active, engaged in Krishna consciousness, we experience this happiness. And his aim is inward in the sense it's again not connected to this material world. And yeah, he is liberated, ultimately attains the Supreme. Unless one is able to release happiness from within, how can one retire from external engagements meant for deriving superficial happiness? So this is very important. One should not give up work unless he has, if there is propensity to work, to engage externally in non-bhakti activities, such a person should not give up work, because then he'll go crazy, because he's not going to get that in that sense. In bhakti activities are not external in that sense, right? A liberated person enjoys happiness by factual experience. He can therefore sit silently at any place and enjoy the activities of life from within. Life from within basically means not something vague internally for us. It is just that it's not connected to the material world. It's connected to the Atma. The Atma experiences happiness when engaged in service of Krishna. Such a liberated person no longer desires external material happiness. So we don't need anything that belongs to this material world to make us happy. This state is called Brahmabhuta, attaining which one is assured to go back home, back to Godhead. So till that stage it is called Jiva Bhuta, then this is called Brahma Bhuta. Jiva Bhuta means attached to things of this material world. Brahma Bhuta means attached to Brahman, which means nothing connected to this material world. So that's what this is talking about. 25. Labante Brahma Nirvanam Rishayakshina Kalmashaha Chinna Dvaidha Yatatmanaha Sarvabhuta Hiterataha. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, and who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. So there are four things here. One is free from dualities. Minds are engaged within, that means not engaged in material things. Busy welfare of all living beings, mainly preaching, giving others Krishna consciousness. Free from all sins, four regulative principles primarily. Only a person who is fully in Krishna consciousness can be said to be engaged in the welfare work for all living entities. And a person is actually in the knowledge that Krishna is the fountainhead of everything, then when he acts in that spirit, he acts for everyone. So, okay, so he acts in that spirit means that knowing that everything belongs to Krishna, and also knowing that every jiva belongs to Krishna, he acts for everyone because he wants everybody to go back to Krishna. Then he is engaged in real welfare work. Sufferings of humanity are due to forgetfulness of Krishna's supreme enjoyer, supreme proprietor, and supreme friend, that we discuss in the 29th verse. Therefore, to act to revive this consciousness within the entire human society is the highest welfare work. One cannot be engaged in such first-class welfare work without being liberated in the supreme. A Krishna conscious person has no doubt about the supremacy of Krishna. He has no doubt because he is completely freed from all sins. This is the state of divine love. So completely freed from all sins is basically anartha nivritti. When all anarthas go, that is bhava. So that is what Prabhupada is calling as bhava is or preliminary stage of prema. So one cannot be engaged in such welfare work without being liberated, which means that if we have crossed this material conception of I and mine and trying to acquire things, getting happiness from this material world, etc., only then can we think beyond ourselves. Otherwise, we are always thinking only about ourselves, me and mine. So only when one is liberated, he will start thinking about others, others' welfare, and give them Krishna consciousness. A person engaged only in ministering to the physical welfare of human society cannot factually help anyone. So this is very important. So many institutions which are just doing physical welfare. Many times people come and ask ISKCON also, why don't you guys do physical welfare? And Prabhupada once said, saying that we are for spiritual welfare. There are other organizations for physical welfare. Let them do their work, we will do our work. If they don't do their work, there are many others who can do that work. But if we don't do the spiritual welfare work, there is nobody else who is doing it. Because literally, practically in the world today, it's only ISKCON which is trying to minister to the spiritual welfare. Temporary relief of the external body and the mind is not satisfactory, is not sufficient. The real cause of one's difficulties in the hard struggle for life may be found in one's forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Lord. When a man is fully conscious of his relationship with Krishna, he is actually liberated soul, although he may be in the material tabernacle. Fully conscious, not just knowing. Fully conscious means basically he has come to that Brahmabhuta platform. So he is a liberated soul. Times misbehaving, engaging in something nonsense, but as long as we are also continuously engaging in activities of bhakti and letting ourselves to do more and more or be under the guidance of somebody who's pushing us, somehow engage more and more in bhakti, then automatically the senses will come under control. But if we are not engaging more and more in devotional service, then and if we let our senses loose, then we are in for big trouble. In a conditioned soul, the desire to enjoy the fruitive results of work is so deep-rooted that it's very difficult even for great sages to control such desires, despite great endeavors. So we know so many instances, Vishwamitra, Shiva, etc. A devotee of the Lord, constantly engaged in devotional service in Krishna consciousness, perfect in self-realization, very quickly attains liberation in the Supreme. Owing to his complete knowledge and self-realization, he always remains in trance. So owing to his complete knowledge in self-realization, he remains in trance. Trance is basically remains internal. He just pulls back all his senses from external engagement unless absolutely required. For example, he'll not use his tongue unless he has to talk something Krishna conscious or he has to accept prasadam to keep body and soul together. So like that, he is pulled back his senses from engaging in sense pleasures. Why? Because of his complete knowledge in self-realization. Because he knows that I don't belong to, I'm not this body. I don't belong to this material world. This body is a bad bargain and I just have to somehow make use of it to achieve perfection. So he will always remain in trance. Darshana dhyana samsparsher matsyakurma vihangamaha swanyapatyani pushnanti tataham api padmaja. By vision, by meditation, and by touch only do the fish, tortoise, and birds maintain their offspring. Similarly, do I also, O Padmaja. Okay, fish brings up its offspring simply by looking at them. Tortoise brings up its offspring simply by meditation. Eggs of the tortoise are laid on land, and the tortoise meditates on the eggs while in the water. Similarly, the devotee in Krishna consciousness, although far away from the Lord's abode, can elevate himself to that abode simply by thinking of him constantly by engagement in Krishna consciousness. He does not feel the pangs of material miseries. This state of life is called Brahma Nirvana. So the more day we stop getting affected by material miseries, be it Adhyatmika, Adi Bhautik, Adi Daivik, then we can understand that we have reached Brahma Nirvana, Brahma Bhuta stage. or the absence of material misery is due to being constantly immersed in the Supreme. So this is what, if we engage in that way, then we are assured of liberation in the very near future. Completely engrossed in Krishna consciousness, then we can achieve perfection in the very near future. Okay, I think 27, 28, 29. I don't know if we can. Okay, yeah, I think we can finish it. 27, 28. Sparshan kritva bahirbahyam chakshushaivantare bhruvoh pranapanau samau kritva nasabhyantaracharinav yatendriyamano buddhir munirmoksha parayanaha vigateccha bhayakrodha yassada mukta eva saha. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. The transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. So Krishna here is talking about Dhyana Yoga process. Not everything about Dhyana Yoga is relevant for us, but some aspects are, which we'll discuss in the next chapter. But interestingly here, by this artificial process of pranayama, one can actually control the mind, because the mind becomes focused on the breath, and the mind is disconnected from its normal thought process. So it helps the yogis to control the mind, senses, and intelligence. And once he's able to control, then he becomes free from raga, bhaya, krodha, desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state. So initially, only when one is doing sadhana, Ashtanga Yoga sadhana, then he will be in this state. Then the rest of the time he will be not in complete control. So like that, gradually, slowly, he keeps increasing, when all the time he is under control. Similar thing in Bhakti Yoga. We are practicing for 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever, and that's why I keep thinking about increasing the number of hours of practice, because the more hours of sadhana, we are basically doing practice to do what? We are not trying to artificially control mind. We are trying to focus the mind on Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna, by reading Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, hearing about Krishna, hearing what Krishna has spoken, etc., etc. We are trying to we automatically achieve mind control, sense control, but it depends on for how much time we engage. Initially, till we get sufficient spiritual strength, only during the time we are engaging in that activity, our senses, mind, etc. will be controlled. But subsequently, that kind of strength will become available, and even after beyond our sadhana time, when we are engaged in maybe normal household activities or office work, etc., we will be able to control our mind from unnecessarily indulging. It's not like we cannot completely stop thinking about things belonging to this material world, because we live here. So for example, if somebody has to think about, okay, I have to pay electricity bill, I have to buy groceries, etc. Now this is unavoidable, but we don't indulge in it. We just do it as a matter of fact. Okay, I need to go buy some stuff. Okay, done. Right? So that spiritual strength has to keep coming with more and more sadhana. Then we will not get pulled, distracted by these material things around us. So it's a parallel in Bhakti Yoga also. But the only difference is that it's a indirect process, in the sense it's not directly focused on controlling the mind and senses, but it's directly focused on serving Krishna, and it's more powerful because there are practically very less chances of fall down. But those engaged in Ashtanga Yoga, because it's a mechanical process, they can anytime fall down. Being engaged in Krishna consciousness, one can immediately understand one's spiritual identity, and then one can understand the Supreme Lord by means of devotional service. When one is well situated in devotional service, one comes to the transcendental position, qualified to feel the presence of the Lord in the sphere of one's activity. So well situated in devotional service. feel the presence of the Lord in the sphere of one's activity. So it could be seeing everything with the transcendental vision, seeing Krishna's hands in everything happening, and at a higher level, literally seeing, feeling Krishna's presence when we come closer to Bhava Prema. This particular position is called liberation. So here Prabhupada is talking about just that Brahmabhuta, where the transcendental position, he'll feel the presence of the Lord in the sense that he is not connected to this material world. He's risen above this material world. So in that sense, he can connect with the Supreme because everything is Supreme. After explaining the above principles of liberation in the Supreme, the Lord gives instruction to Arjuna as to how one can come to that position by the practice of mystic yoga, known as Ashtanga Yoga, which is divisible into eightfold process: Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. In the sixth chapter, the subject of yoga is explicitly detailed, and at the end of the fifth, it is only preliminarily explained. One has to drive out the sense objects such as sound, touch, form, taste, and smell by the Pratyahara process. Okay, and then keep the vision of the eyes between the two eyebrows and concentrate on the tip of the nose with half closed lids. There's no benefit in closing the eyes altogether because then there's every chance of falling asleep. Nor is there benefit in opening the eyes completely because then there's a hazard of being attracted by sense objects. So this is true for us also. If you can sit and chant like this, half closed eyes, right? Or even closed eyes if you are not used to going to sleep when chanting with closed eyes. Half closed eyes, definitely not open eyes. Open eyes is dangerous, super dangerous. We get just dragged into some, we see some object and then we are gone. The breathing movement is restrained within the nostrils by neutralizing the up moving and down moving air within the body. By practice of such yoga, one is able to gain control over the senses, refrain from outward sense objects, and thus prepare oneself for liberation. This yoga process helps one become free from all kinds of fear and anger, and thus feels the presence of super soul in the transcendental situation. In other words, Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of executing yoga principles. This will be thoroughly explained in the next chapter. A Krishna conscious person, however, being always engaged in devotion service, does not risk losing his senses to some other engagement. This is a better way of controlling the senses than by Ashtanga Yoga. So we discussed this. Okay. So 5.29 famous words: Bhoktaram Yagna Tapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suradam Sarvabhutanam Gnatva Mam Shantim Rachyati. Person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifice and austerities, supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and benefactor and well-wisher. So this is the key thing. He is our well-wisher. Such a person attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. The conditioned souls within the clutches of illusory energy are all anxious to attain peace in the material world, but they do not know the formula for peace, which is explained in this part of the Bhagavad Gita. The greatest peace formula is simply this: Lord Krishna is the beneficiary of all human activities and should offer everything to the transcendental service of the Lord because he is the proprietor of the planets, of all the planets and demigods thereon. No one is greater than he. He is greater than the greatest of the demigods, Lord Shiva and Brahma. In the Vedas, the Supreme Lord is described as Tam Ishwaranam Paramam Maheshwaram. Under the spell of illusion, living entities are trying to be lords of all they survey, but actually they are dominated by the material energy of the Lord. The Lord is a master of material nature. The conditioned souls are under the stringent rules of material nature. Unless one understands these bare facts, it is not possible to achieve peace in the world either individually or collectively. This is the sense of Krishna consciousness. Lord Krishna is the supreme predominator, and all living entities, including the great demigods, are his subordinates. One can attain peace only in complete Krishna consciousness. How can one achieve peace in this? Because if we are thinking that I am alone, I have to take care of everything, etc., there is so much of pressure. When we know that he is the boss, super boss, and we are surrendered to him, then there is complete peace. Everything is under his control. Everything is coming from him. And I'm a tiny creature and I'm just depending on him, the super powerful. So it's complete peace. No chance of failure in this relationship. right? And he's our well wisher. Every time we are in some difficult situation, we should think that Krishna is our well wisher. So why we have to worry? Irrespective of whether we are worthy of it or not, if we simply accept Krishna, saying, Krishna, I'm surrendering it to you, you please take care of me in all respects. Krishna will take care because it's his promise. He's made a promise, saying that I will take care. So we have to just depend on Krishna because he is the most qualified person to accept our surrender. And we just depend on him and we remain peaceful. That's it. No tension about anything in this world. The fifth chapter is a practical explanation of Krishna consciousness, generally known as Karma Yoga. The question of mental speculation as to how Karma Yoga can give liberation is answered here with. To work in Krishna consciousness is to work with complete knowledge of the Lord as the predominator. Such work is non-different from transcendental knowledge. Such work is non-different from transcendental knowledge. Because when we work for Krishna, that is Krishna consciousness. So it is non-different. Direct Krishna consciousness is Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga is a path leading to Bhakti Yoga. Krishna consciousness means to work in full knowledge of one's relationship with the Supreme Absolute. And the perfection of this consciousness is full knowledge of Krishna. So, first is Krishna consciousness means to work in full knowledge of one's relationship with the Supreme Absolute. That means that I am the servant of Krishna. Next perfection is full knowledge of Krishna himself. So first is perfection of the relationship, that I am servant, so I have to serve him. Then second one is full knowledge of Krishna himself. A pure soul is the eternal servant of God as his fragmental part and parcel. He comes into contact with Maya due to the desire to lord it over Maya, and that is the cause of his many sufferings. As long as he is in contact with matter, he has to execute work in terms of material necessities. Krishna consciousness, however, brings one into the spiritual life, even while one is within the jurisdiction of matter, for it is an arousing of spiritual existence by practice in the material world. So this is sadhana bhakti. So spiritual existence becomes aroused, awakened. That's why we say bhakti is there in everybody. It has to be just wakened up, awoken. The more one is advanced, the more he is freed from the clutches of matter. So this is very, very important. Many people ask saying that, okay, when will miseries, when will I get over all prarabdha karma? When will misery stop? The more one is advanced, the more he is freed. So to the extent we are advanced, to that extent we are freed from clutches of matter. Lord is not partial toward anyone. Everything depends on one's practical performance of duties. So this is very, very, very important. So it's not like Lord is giving some mercy to somebody, not giving to somebody else. No. Everything depends on one's practical performance of duties in Krishna consciousness. So how much we are dedicated, how much we are committed to act, to engage in sadhana bhakti, that determines how fast we can make advancement. Which helps one control the senses in every respect and conquer the influence of desire and anger. And one who stands fast in Krishna consciousness, controlling the above-mentioned passions, remains factually in the transcendental stage of Brahma Nirvana. The Eightfold Yoga system is automatically practiced in Krishna consciousness because the ultimate purpose is served. Process is different, but ultimately we also come to Samadhi. This is a gradual process. There's a gradual process of elevation in the practice of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. But these only preface perfection by devotional service. It's only preface, meaning that devotional service supersedes all this, which alone can award peace to the human being. It is highest perfection of life. Okay, thus end the Bhakti Vedanta purports to the fifth chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of Karma Yoga or action in Krishna consciousness. Okay. If anybody has anything to ask, slightly, little bit technical verses, but I try to explain to whatever extent I had understood. Any questions, or was it too fast today? Okay. Fine. So no questions and we'll end. So we'll continue with 6th chapter from Wednesday. Okay, so we conclude. Vanchakalpatarupyascha kripasindhubhyo cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Samaveta Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.